Welcome back. This video is about how I built a dumbbell rack out of a few inexpensive pieces of lumber. Back during the pandemic, my wife got pretty into fitness and she collected a few different dumbbells. Here's some footage of them lying on the floor. She had the little 3-pounders and then she had some 5-pounders and some 8-pounders and some 10-pounders. And they were just kind of stacked haphazardly in one corner of our closet, and she would just take out whichever two she was going to use that day. And then she got the bright idea to ask me, hey, can you build a little holder for those? And then I remembered I also have some dumbbells. I haven't been using them a lot lately. I mean, you can tell from my sheer lack of bulk that I haven't, but I have them and I sometimes use them. And I thought, hey, I could probably build a rack that incorporates all of those. So the first thing I did was I drew up some plans. I take that back. The first thing I did was figure out where we would put it. And we had a space, a gap between our china cabinet and our entertainment center because our dining room and our living room are just one giant room. And right between those was about a 37-inch gap. So I figured if I built a 36-inch little rack out of wood, it would slide right in there. So that's what I started working on. And, I did all this obviously by hand, not even using a straight edge, but I came up with what would work. I also measured the dumbbells and then measured the space between the end parts so I would know how long the handle was, so I would, how wide a bar that it could sit upon, a rail. And here's a slightly closer view of the idea that I came up with. Basically, there would be two 2x4s vertically on the ground next to each other, and that's where the bigger, heavier ones would go at the bottom. And then there would be one 2x4 on the top lying flat, supported by a center post and 2 end posts. And then I tried to draw a 3D view of it, how it would all fit together. And yes, I decided to do some cutout there on that top board so that the end posts would stick up through it. I don't know why I did that. I should have just had it lying flat on top of the end posts, but I decided to do it this way instead, just for fun. And here are all the boards that I used. On the right is a rectangular piece of plywood that would act as the base. It's a 3/4 inch plywood left over from a giant sheet that I had cut out from to make my new workbench. And then here's the two 2x4s that will sit vertically next to each other. These do double duty. Not only are they going to hold the bottom dumbbells, but they're also going to sandwich those posts in to hold the posts up. So yeah, the dumbbells will sit there, and here's an end post. And of course here I'm not attaching them, I'm just setting them on the floor of the garage. I have one of those nice little pads there so my knees don't hit the concrete. Now this piece hasn't been fully cut out yet, but you can see the notches that I cut in there by hand. And there's the little center post that's going to go in the middle that the main bar will rest on. And the whole thing looks kind of like that. And then I went and got a couple of dumbbells to test it out, but of course I knocked the whole thing down because I forgot that it wasn't attached to anything yet. So after setting it back up, you can see that the dumbbells there will rest on that rail on the top once they're attached to the posts, and then the heavier dumbbells will fit nicely there on the bottom. Now the two little notches that I cut out, as I said, I did that by hand. I just measured and cut down with the handsaw, but at the bottom I had this extra space left over. My chisels aren't razor sharp like in all the videos that you see from the professional woodworkers on YouTube, so I decided to use a coping saw. So I went and bought a coping saw, and I also had this little oscillating multi-tool. I didn't know which one would work better for that, so I decided to do one end with the coping saw, which I had never used before, so I'm trying to figure that out here. And I decided to use the multi-tool for the other end. So here is the footage of me getting the cut started here with the coping saw, and then turning it as I've been told until I can get it level and then go across my line there. And we can speed up that footage till I get all the way across. And I chipped off a few bits with the chisel there, and it looks like the board will fit. Now for the other end, as I said, I used this oscillating multi-tool, which I've had for a few years, but I don't have a lot of opportunities to use it. But it seemed to make pretty quick work. You can just, aim in at the line there. The only problem with it is that it vibrates a lot, and it's pretty difficult for me anyway to get it to just go straight in. So I had to be pretty careful with it. And at the beginning here, I was using this blade that's a little too narrow for the job I was doing, but it did the job. It just took longer than using the coping saw. And the 2x4 that was supposed to go through the notch stuck out just a little bit, so I had to go back through there some more. And this time I used the slightly wider blade, and I ended up having to use a chisel as well, and got the notches all cut out. Now I don't have any footage of the actual assembly. I know that would probably be fun to watch, but it's pretty difficult for me anyway to set up a camera in a spot where I can do the assembly because I'm going to be moving around and knocking over that tripod constantly. But basically I just drilled some holes and used some wood screws on most of this. I also used glue. The first thing I did was do those 2 rails at the bottom, and I drilled in from the bottom of the plywood to hold those rails down with some wood glue. Then I put the center posts in between them and drilled in screw holes from the side. And I put some glue in between those 2. And then on the top, I set a level up there to make sure that, I've got it level on the 2 ends. And on those, I actually drilled a pretty wide hole all the way through, and I cut a dowel, a wooden dowel, I think almost a 1/2 inch wooden dowel, and ran it all the way through there and glued that in for some stability. In the cracks, I put a little bit of wood filler, and of course I sanded the entire thing, and then I put paste wax over all of this. I almost coated it with the clear coat polyurethane, which I use on a lot of my projects, but that takes quite a few days to fully cure to where you can set something on it and it won't stick to it. Even if you sand it and even if you, polish it and all that stuff, it's still a little sticky for days, at least in my experience all the times that I've used the high gloss clear coat. So I tried paste wax on this, which took a while to apply. I know in the videos that I've seen, the instructional videos on how to use paste wax, it goes on in just a couple of minutes and then they buff it off in a couple of minutes and man, it's perfect. This took hours, in case you've never used it before. Or if you have and it doesn't take hours, let me know your secret. Because I rubbed it on with a cloth just like everybody says, wait a few minutes for it to start to set, and then buffed it off with another cloth, and it wasn't a fully even coat, so I had to go over the whole thing again. And that was actually the hardest part of this, was getting the paste wax to be even over the whole thing. But once that was on, it's perfect, and it sits here between our entertainment center on the right and the china cabinet on the left, and it easily holds all this weight. I'm sure it could hold quite a bit more if I had more to put on there, and in fact, before I put the weights on there, I stood on it just to be sure, and it easily held me. So anyway, it's not the prettiest dumbbell rack in the world, but it's really solid and it fits exactly in the space that I wanted. And it didn't cost as much as the ones that I saw in the store that were made specifically for those dumbbells on top. But that one wouldn't have held those heavier dumbbells on the bottom. There wouldn't have been a place for them. So this holds everything. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.